Hello and welcome to the 8th episode of the Student Recap Podcast. Today we will have a second music catch up, and sorry for having no host today other than me. I wasn't able to schedule anybody else, and I apologize for advance. So today I'm just gonna be talking about a bunch of new music that came out, like either in the past few weeks or past month, from a few groups that I like. So first off, we have Gold by Itzy. That was their most recent EP, just released yesterday. And that is their comeback with Leah after her 1 year hiatus. So Gold, the title track, I think it embodies the spirit of Itzy with Leah now being like back to part of the group. And it definitely has a different vibe now because she adds a more cutesy feel like Yuna does, in my opinion. And maybe that's just like something that happened in the production of the songs, but the beats definitely feel more up-tempo and happy. The other tracks of Gold, like Supernatural, Imaginary Friends, Bad Girls Are Us, I think they're pretty mid. You could say they're midsy. They're just like, they're not what I was expecting for the album, and basically like, this was supposed to be a celebration era, right? Since it's kind of reunion, but also an anniversary since it's been 5 years since Itzy debuted. And also Stray Kids had kind of a celebration album in 8. But I feel like coming from the same company, JYP put a lot less effort into this Gold EP rather than 8, because 8 had bangers like all the way down the track list. I feel like Gold had a lot less of that, but maybe it's just like my tangibility and my music taste. 5, it's just like a funny track because it's all about how Leah's coming back and how it like makes the team. Featuring Changbin of Stray Kids. I really like that track because one, I like Stray Kids, and it's just a really interesting piece. I like I don't know, the story of the song. And all the other versions of like the songs from Born to Be, Untouchable, Mr. Vampire, Escalator. I feel like those were interesting, but they were just extras on the track list since they only added a few extra times when Leah had vocals in them. Yeah, so that's what I think about Itzy. Next up, I have the most recent like few tracks from Stray Kids. I mean, you could call it an EP. I think it's a collection of tracks. Falling Up, Night, all of those recent tracks from a few days ago. Um, Night, I like the song. It's not my favorite, but I feel like this was just a very commercialized release, and there wasn't much development put into it. Also, like just having produced 8, obviously they would be kind of flushed out from creativity, but I just think they could have done a little bit better on this. Another K-pop group that I like, or more correctly, K-rock, Live and Fall by Xdinary Heroes. That's an amazing new album. Like, I enjoy 75% of the tracks in that album. Instead, which is a new one, Save Me, Boy Comics, Symphony, they're all really good and embody like the spirit of Xdinary Heroes being more of instrumental rock focus group. Obviously they have their vocals, but now in like every release that they have, you have that one track, like the short one, such as XH World 75, which is like a nice guitar solo to get you in the mood for how the album's going to go. And I just enjoyed that because there's no other group like Xdinary Heroes. And then Night Before the End, Feeling Nice, they're both like ballad-like, a little bit more sad-toned, but they're still enjoyable. And obviously they put in Love and Fear because it's just like a really popular track for them. There's so much potential in them having Love and Fear, and it just like, if it helps them sell more albums, it was a good addition into Live and Fall. More like in the past, Crazy by Le Seraphim. So, I think Crazy should have been the title track, obviously having the album being titled Crazy, not Chasing Lightning. I think Chasing Lightning is just a musical mistake. I wouldn't even call it music, because it's just a bunch of words and yapping put into a song, and then there's the Greek yogurt reference and dogs. It's just not correct, in my opinion, for what that should be like. Piero, I like the sort of distorted feel of it. And if you watch the music video, the visuals definitely align with that. It's really cool. Crazier, 1800 Han Fun, and Chasing Lightning, as I said earlier, they're just mediocre tracks. I mean, Crazier, like, why would you try to make your first song better? That's like causing competition between those songs within the same album. So even though this was like pretty popular among the masses, in my opinion, this was not their best release. I don't know. I've just been very critical of groups recently. Maybe it's just like my psyche, but they need to start putting in some more work. One of my most recent favorites of like recent K-pop releases is Sad Song by P1 Harmony. Like, the beat in that, as other YouTubers have referenced, there's a Latin flow to it. It's just an amazing song. And I'm kind of sad that it didn't come with any other songs. It's like a standalone single. I mean, it stands out like that, but if they could make Sad Song, there's a lot more that they can do. I think P1 Harmony, they could definitely get back and have a world tour, maybe next summer or late next year, because they're putting out a lot of hits, I'm pretty sure. So Blackpink had their like individual comebacks. So Mantra by Jennie that just released, I think, on the 10th. So there was a lot of hate on her, but overall, this is actually a pretty interesting tune. It just brought like her individuality as the other former like members of Blackpink have had, and I don't know, I just like it. And then I'm surprised that Moonlit Floor by Lisa, also a former member of Blackpink, is so high because, well, according to the Spotify statistics, it's second place on her most popular tracks. And obviously that's not by like numbers, but that's by the exponential growth of the numbers. This might just be like the first few days of the release and all that, but I think it's gonna succeed well. I actually haven't listened to the track, so sorry if you don't think my opinion matters, but in a commercial standpoint, I think it's gonna be a success. Going on to a rather controversial group, XG with If You Know, You Know. Just the global girl group pop style, I don't like it, and many of their songs have felt like hyperpop. And I'll reference 100 gecs, which maybe some of my friends will talk about in a future episode. But this hyperpop standard, it's all very auto-tuned, and the ideas presented in each music video or each song are very artificial. Like, even more than, let's say, aespa with the Kwangya concept, with AI and all the robot stuff that they have in their music videos, they still have good vocals, right? But XG just takes that to another level, and they're like, oh yeah, let's sing with super auto-tune and have like crazy wolves costumes and like monsters and stuff. I just think that XG, it's a cool idea from their management company, but it's not for me. But what they did well on this track was that If You Know, You Know, it was like a lessened version of the hyperpop you're used to from them. It's calmer in a way, closer to K-pop. Not in the sense that they're speaking Korean, but just the feel of it is closer to K-pop. So jumping on to a completely different genre, recently, Jelly Roll released the song Winning Streak. And so I actually heard about him writing the song on a podcast, The Daily, which I'll talk about shortly. And this was probably a month ago, and he said he was going to release this. And basically, it's about like his addiction and realizing that not everybody is perfect and that we all have our problems in life. We're not going to just have a victory every single day, and just like having empathy for others in general. So talking about the Daily, that's actually one of the podcasts I listen to. It's from the New York Times. It's a pretty interesting show about like the economy, technology, geopolitics, obviously. So a lot of the stuff that I talk about on other episodes is influenced by this show. And also in addition to that, I listen to The Journal, which is another podcast by the Wall Street Journal. And this is also like the daily. It gives your like daily breakdown of news and events in the world. But the reason I have both of these is so like obviously nowadays you can't get like paper news that easy, and I just want to be able to digest information every day in order to become more intellectually advanced person. And they're very helpful like in school because then I can know stuff that I wouldn't have known previously. And this kind of counteracts the other shows I listen to because it gives a more, let's say, left-leaning perspective in comparison to the more right-leaning perspective of other shows that I listen to. So, I listen to the Bubba Army Podcast, that's based in Tampa, Florida. And it's like this talk show with this probably boomer-aged man. And obviously some of his opinions can be outdated, not really modern, but it's interesting to see how after each like political event or event in general that happens in this country, how each different podcast breaks it down because obviously the Bubba Army podcast, they have a lot of Trump and MAGA support in Florida, and that influences the show, not directly, but with like the hosts and guests that come onto the show, and that kind of counteracts the Daily, which is by the New York Times, and their guests. Well, they recently had Vice President, well, Vice President J.D. Vance on their podcast, but most of their guests are definitely at least center, I would say, and otherwise the interview gets stale and very tense, like with the JD Vance interview, because JD Vance like completely just got locked up on his words after the interviewer asked if he would certify the 2024 election and if Trump lost in 2020. Okay, well, I ventured off. So basically, not really about music, but the podcasts, they're just very helpful in shaping my worldview. And, well, obviously I have my friends and, like, exterior news that I listen to as well. But I think those shows just really have shaped my personality, and they partially inspired me to make my own podcast as well. And back to music. So, this was also from like a month ago. Una Velita by Bad Bunny. That was an interesting beat because it connects to his Latin culture a little bit more. And basically, like most Latin American artists, they don't go deep into the culture that often. And this was an interesting track that, I don't know, gave a bit more of his backstory. Jumping to also a completely other genre. So, the recent release of Arabian Heartbreak by Manal. I think that was a pretty interesting release because one, she was pregnant, which would have made like recording and being in the studio and all that very difficult. And two, I was surprised by the album by the fact that there were like 5 songs that she released earlier this year or last year on the track. But that was countered by the addition of like 10 new songs that nobody had ever seen before. I just think that this album showed a lot of her talent as a singer and kind of the Maghreb culture where she comes from. So the songs that were repeated, but like that were released earlier, were Cabaret, Morak, Mabula, and Baba. Those are all previous songs. Well, obviously Cabaret was like a week before, so it was kind of a pre-release. One of my favorite tracks from this album was Plastic. I just like the heavy synth and kind of just thump to the song. It's very forceful. I don't know. I just like forceful songs that bring a message. And the other songs, I don't really have many thoughts about the other songs in the album. They're okay. It's just obviously me not being able to understand them has a limit of my introspection. Um, yeah, so I think this will finish on the 8th episode of the Student Recap Podcast. Sorry if this episode wasn't as long. I've just been like having a lot of scheduling issues with recording episodes, but over the next few weeks I will put out a good amount of extra content for you guys to have in order to like supplement what you might not have gotten from this episode and last week's episode. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next week.